this is a miracle. And that's all because I took and I followed some suggestions, and I did those 12 steps. And I just took some suggestions and got a sponsor and hung out with the right people and did the right step and finally got that spiritual connection and got that thing that I was looking for the whole time that was always there. It was inside of me. I just didn't know it.
It's time for the Share Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host,
On today's episode of the Share Podcast, Randy H., with 15 years sober, takes us through 20 years of drug dealing, addiction, and alcoholism. At the age of 18, Randy moves out of his parents' house and moves into his friend's closet. To make ends meet, he starts selling drugs to college students in all the local schools. A few years later, Randy moves to Mexico to sell timeshares and begins consuming massive amounts of cocaine and heavily drinking daily. Unable to stop on his own, Randy moves back to the United States and gets a job in a car dealership 2 blocks from an AA meeting and finally finds recovery. Join us now as Randy gets the monkey off of his back and takes us through his amazing journey in recovery, traveling to Machu Picchu, Uganda, and Mount Kilimanjaro. You absolutely do not want to miss this episode. And after this interview, if you enjoyed listening to the Share Podcast, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. This will ensure we get ranked well on these networks, and that means more people will easily find the Share Podcast. This is the best way to show your support and help us grow. Now back to the show. Hey, Randy, thanks for joining us.
Hey, man, you bet, man. I wouldn't miss this for nothing.
I love it. How you feeling, man?
Hey, man, I feel great. I woke up and did my little deal and had my little quiet time, said my prayer, and got my day going.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about that for a minute, Randy. Let's dive into your story, but first, let's talk a little bit about that time. Tell us a little bit about how your life is today, your hobbies, what you do for a living. You've got a pretty exciting life, Randy. It's very relaxed, but I'm sure people would love to hear about where you live and how your life is, including recovery. So go for it.
Oh, it's great, man. Yeah, I'm living down here in San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua. Actually, 30 minutes from the border of Costa Rica, right in the Pacific Ocean. Great little fishing, surfing village, and yeah, it's beautiful down here. I came down in 2005.
And what's your daily routine like, including recovery?
Well, my daily routine, I have kind of a big vacation type home where I live on the 3rd floor and I rent out the house below on the first couple levels, vacation, rental, and sometimes it's kind of like a high-end B&B type of thing. So, but what I do when I get up in the morning is I usually get up about 5 and my wife usually gets up at 6. So 5 o'clock I'm up and I'm just, I have my little quiet time. I just get right up, go over there, and, I immediately do my prayer and just say, thanks for giving me another 24 hours of not drinking and being clean. And I'm ready for another day. Whatever your will is, thy will be done. Take away that obsession, man. It's been gone for years, but I still pray to take away that obsession because I never thought that would have been possible way back in the beginning.
Absolutely. And what about meeting routines down there?
Well, so what we do is after I get up, my wife likes to go to the gym in town, so I go to town, and some mornings I meet my buddy Ken at the market at 7 o'clock in the morning. He's getting his breakfast, and we just, it's our little time just to touch base and say hi. But now we are up to 3 meetings a week here. I came here in 2005. Me and Ken started the first English-speaking meeting, and up until recently, basically the only one in Nicaragua. But we just did 1 a week, and now we have 3. We have a speaker meeting on Monday. We have a step study on Wednesday, and then we have daily reflections on Saturday. And there is a new place about an hour from here, Iguana, that just started up a Friday morning meeting. They got some people that'll be there for a few months, so we've been supporting that meeting. And one of the ladies out there had 11-year birthday yesterday, so she came in and we had she got to celebrate that. So we got basically about four of us, or kind of 5. A few people are just kind of toying around a little bit, coming in and out and checking it out. And it's basically about 4 of us all the time.
So you guys are driving out now to, where is it again? To where?
It's Playa Iguana. Okay. It's about an hour drive. It's the last 3 Fridays. They do a 10 o'clock meeting out there.
And what do you guys listen to on your way out there?
Hey, we got to have the big O, my man. Yeah, we listened to 2 on the way out because it takes about an hour and a half by the time you start and everything else and cruise out there. So, yeah, it's a great way to have some fun and get some laughs. And also, remind us what we're going to and what we're in the middle of.
Absolutely.
Things are good today, but I got to be reminded.
You get in the car, you plug in the Share podcast, and you're on the road.
Hey, it's great, man. And that's why I got about 8 I haven't listened to because I got to wait. I want to be surprised. I want to laugh and hear stuff like, wow, can you believe that? You always hear something. I always hear something, I should say.
Oh, tell me about it. So tell us how much clean time you have and when your anniversary date is.
May 12th, 2000. So I'm a little over 15 years now.
Excellent.
When I got here, I had 5 years.
Wonderful. And tell us about how old you were the first time you drank and used drugs, and more importantly, how did they make you feel?
Well, basically, it was when I moved out of the house. My parents got divorced because my mom got saved, and we did this whole religious thing. And anyway, I didn't drink or use drugs the whole time I was living at home. I had this little guilt thing about that. My friends did and everything else. I used to hang out a little bit, but we weren't allowed to go to movies and go to dances and listen to the radio and all that stuff.
What religion was this?
Oh, this was a kind of a heavy-duty Baptist thing.
Okay.
We were that one little house on the block on Wednesday with a prayer meeting, sitting around the living room, singing all the songs and that type of stuff. So started our own little church, and it was all good. I mean, my mom thought she was doing the right thing, and we got a lot of good out of that. But I ended up and leaving finally and kind of calling bullshit on that. But anyway, I left when I went to junior college for 1 semester, and then I came home. I ended up moving out. I went to my friend's apartment and crashed on his floor.
Okay.
And they always would ask me, hey, you want to smoke this joint? Hey, you want to drink? No. And so I could not wait after I moved out for them to pass that joint around and ask me. And I said, yeah. And they all go, you got to be kidding me. And I was just waiting. I was just waiting for that. Matter of fact, we smoked that joint. We went to the high school gym that I graduated from the year before, and we watched Styx in a concert and sat in the gym floor. The group Styx way back when.
So the first time you got high, you went to a concert?
Yeah, at a high school gym floor. I started drinking because I didn't like the taste of booze, but I could choke it down because that first time I had that drink, I felt that warm rush going down. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't that church kid. I always thought I was different. Back then, I always thought that I was different, kind of because I was the homely looking guy. I used to get picked on. We had the church thing going on too, and kind of geeky and all that. And over these years now, by peeling this onion away, I kind of find a common thread with alcohol and addiction and stuff. People not feeling just a little bit less or not fitting in. And I always thought that was kind of the thing. But man, the minute I had that drink and we all started laughing and then talking to the girls and dancing, I used to call it chemical courage back then. And that was exactly what it was.
Liquid courage.
Yeah. And I hated the taste of alcohol. I did not like it. But when we went to the bars, then I would drink. Then I found the pills. Those were my favorite, man. That was it, because then I could eat a Quaalude or a Tuinol or Seconal, whatever. And that would give me that instant drink thing. And then when I got to the bars, I could just order a couple doubles and kind of keep that thing rolling,
Randy, you're all warmed up, man. You're ready to rock and roll. I love it. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally your journey into recovery up until today. So, Randy, take it away, buddy.
Wow, what a story. Hey, I got to tell you what, though. Thank you so much for asking me to do this, because like I've learned in this program, I came through the rooms of AA, and, you never turn down a request like this. And living down here, trying to give back as much as I can allows me to keep what I have. That's what I learned in this program. In order for me to keep this, I have to give it away. And I constantly needed to be reminded where I came from. What was it like back then? Because The minute I started I was sleeping in my friend's closet. There was like this closet, and I was sleeping on the floor of this long coat room closet where I could barely fit in there until his roommate moved out about a month later. But that's where I was sleeping. And the guy across the hall from me would always steal the newspaper. And then I met him after about a week. And then it turns out he had some pot, and then he fronted me a pound. And I would sell some to my friends and keep my little stash. And once I had that, not only did things like the drinking and that drugs started to make me feel good, people started coming over what I thought was to see me, but they wanted what I had, and that was drugs. And so that was a way of getting people to like me too. So the drinking and the drugging just all of a sudden gave me that I mean, I had that chemical courage. Now I could talk to the girls. I could go dancing and all that stuff. But it seemed right from the get-go, I was kind of doing it just to kind of get out there. But I liked the release that it gave me. And I actually didn't really kind of get a real job for about the first 3 or 4 years.
How'd you support yourself?
Just doing the drugs, a little side stuff. All my friends were going to college.
So basically, you left a Baptist household, moved into a closet, and started dealing drugs.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, 'cause I met this one guy at the pool. He was great. And then he would front me these bags of pot, and I would get them for 10, sell them for 15, and then I'd have my stash for free. And that's all I cared about. And then one time, somebody came over to get some, and I didn't have any left. But I had my little stash box there, so I opened it up, and I said, I don't have any. He goes, you got some right there. Well, that's mine. Well, so then I gave him some, and I still had stash, and I had some money, and I'm like, wow, I like this. And so then I used to go visit my friends in college. I didn't go to college, but I went to all the colleges. I went to the University of Illinois, Illinois State, Southern Illinois, Eastern Illinois. And then I would bring down like 5 pounds of pot. I'd front it to my friends. They would sell it all. They didn't have any money. I'd hang out for a week or two. They'd pay me, and I'd leave. So I didn't go to college, but I went to the colleges. And those were back in the days with Quaaludes and stuff. I love those, man. And then that's when the Coke started first coming around, and doing the ludes and the Coke. I mean, that was just a lot of fun. Man, those things, no inhibitions for anything.
Were you dealing that too?
Oh, yeah, sure. Because I was always this low-level guy. I always knew everybody. You know, your friends, you go to the bar, you got a pocket full of pills or the Coke. I mean, everybody's coming up to you. You get the girls. I mean, you get everything, and then you're kind of the dude. And back then, it was always, you know, with friends, and wasn't any of the guns, any of that other stuff. The 70s were just a lot different. I was always the guy that when it came to the pills, those ludes and stuff, I'd break them in 4 pieces. I didn't want to like eat a Quaalude and wait for it to dissolve. I had to break that puppy up. You know, throw it in a shot glass of 7-Up and it's just like a fizzy and you just get it down. Or like, you know, if you're eating the Seconal, Tuanols, Nebutols, Ambutols, whatever you got, you take a pin. I would take a pin and poke holes in them. And then I would eat those. I didn't want to wait for time release.
Oh, wow.
You know, one of the stuff now, or Placidos if it didn't have anything. I had liquid in there. You poke the holes in that stuff. But that's what I did. And I used to have a lot of fun. But it seemed to me, looking back on stuff, that I hung around with a group of people that just got loaded all the time. And there was usually somebody in there that was worse off than me. I thought maybe somebody strung out on heroin or something like that. But me, I'm just eating all these pills and doing the Coke and all that. It was all kind of fun and games. But then I had 2 or 3 like hit and run accidents in those days. I remember one time coming back home from the bar because my buddy was too loaded. The owner of the bar said, Randy, get him out of here. I drove him back to my house. And well, he's out on the dance floor. He's got a big bag of Quaaludes in his pocket. And he pulled them out to eat some. And then he put his hand through the baggie and about 100 spilled on the floor. So we're all trying to pick these up. And so I drive him back to my place and I give him his car and I take my roommate's car, which I never did. She was sleeping. I got 2 blocks and turned the corner and we were into the car. I was in a Chrysler Newport. Anyway, I ended up backing up. I hit the car again, broke out the windshield, all that. And by the time I got home, around 2 blocks later, police came and ended up putting me in the hospital. I didn't get really in any trouble for that. Just got a hit and run with a personal injury. And I got lucky in a lot of these things, but I could have killed some people. And I always kind of took it to the limit. I remember my friends, they brought me in some pills into the hospital. And I called my buddy up, hey, come pick me up. I'm in my hospital gown at the payphone, at a phone in the hospital. Tell him to come pick me up so we can go shoot pool and drop me back off at the hospital. And he says, Randy, go back to bed. Oh, my God. So finally, it'd been a few years, and I thought maybe I would just get a job. Somebody had ripped us off for some money, and one guy that I was selling pills to says, hey, man, I work in a phone room. Come work with us. You don't even need a phone name. And I'm like, what's a phone name? Hey, your name's Randy Harvey. Come on, you don't need a phone name. So we were selling tools to farmers and ranchers all over the country. This was back before there were phone rooms. It just seemed like I was having a lot of fun, but I would just always take it too far sometimes. I was always the guy that was starting the parties and good a lot of the times, but then all of a sudden, I should have had 3 or 4 drunk driving tickets or driving while using, and I ended up moving downtown and just so I could be closer to the work. And now I'm living downtown Chicago, and I love that town. That was great. I worked from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon.
Right.
And in Chicago, you had 2:00 bars and you had 4:00 bars. Some bars closed at 2, some at 4. And on Saturdays, you got an extra hour. So I used to love that because I hung out at a place called Mr. Kiley's. It was a 4:00 bar. And, at 2:00, you got the ones that were closing the other bars. And they were already loaded. And then on weekends, on Saturdays, you're out of there at 5. And then I'd have to be at work at 6. So I charged the hill for quite a few years. I just kept going and going. And my boss ended up once a year, he kind of fired me. And I did get in a hit and run with the company car. And I remember I was leaving this party that my friends were having, and I wanted to get home before I got more loaded. And I just ate like 2 more Reds or something. And the next thing you know, I'm in my car, and I'm at a stoplight. And I got 2 flat tires on my right side, and some guy's knocking on my window, and it's 3 a.m. And he says, "Hey, man, wake up, get this car off the road." And so I parked it in the gas station, and I really didn't even know where I was. And I'm like, holy cow, man. What had happened, I'd hit 2 parked cars and kept going. And this guy woke me up at a stoplight, and I walked across the street to the Dunkin' Donuts, and I walked in and sat down, ordered a cup of coffee, and people are just kind of looking at me. It's like 3, almost 4 a.m. now. And I remember I took a sip of the coffee, and it just ran down my chin because I had split my lip wide open on the steering wheel. And I went to drink the coffee, and it just came out through my chin through that big hole in my lip. I was just bleeding. I had bled. So these people were just looking at me. And I'm like, oh, shoot. So I called my roommate up and said, oh, I'm at this Dunkin' Donuts over here. And man, I was going the wrong way, it turned out to be. And so he came and got me. And the next day was Sunday, and my lip was this huge. I remember going to work Monday morning. And the president of the company, I walk in, and he's like, oh, Randy. Hey, Dick, you know what? The boss was a maniac. I said, Dick, Jerry's going to be pissed, but I wrecked the car. Where was it? I don't know. Well, what'd you hit? I'm not sure. I think a car or 2. I don't know. And man, as soon as this boss came in, he was just fit to be tied. And of course, he got lawyers to take care of it. I did hit 2 parked cars and all that. Nothing happened. And only a little bit of that car, the left front, was really smacked up because it was one of those big Electra 225s. That thing was a boat, man.
Did you see The Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh, I love that.
Can you relate to any of it?
Oh, yeah. Now, he was doing massive amounts of lewds, but when they're talking about lewds, I'm like, yeah, man. I can relate to that.
All I could think about was that scene where he's driving the car, and he thinks he got home all right, and he trashed a bunch of cars on the way home.
Yeah, that's what you think.
Is that what was going on with you?
Yeah, but it wasn't to that extent. But yeah, I didn't even remember really. When I hit the other 2 parked cars, I remember that because I backed up. It was a Chrysler, New Yorker, and those were big cars in the day. And those Chryslers, you go to start them and my engine stopped. I broke the windshield out. I always wore glasses, so I couldn't see. I finally got the car started. I backed it up. I put it in drive. I hit the car again. I'm like, oh, man.
Dude.
And I started it up. I backed up. I sideswiped the next car, and I was lost. And I'm like, wait a minute, Randy. Just think for a second. You're only 2 blocks from the house. You just left. So I went around the block. I had that thing floored, but I was going about 5 miles an hour. And I pulled around 2 blocks around. I came into my alley, parked my car, and there was a cop car right behind me following me. I didn't know. And it turned out to be a guy who I used to go to church with.
No.
And I got out, and I say, Bob, I fucked up, man. And he's like, Bob. And my neighbors were great because when I lived in that apartment complex, my neighbors across the hall lived next door to me for a year. They moved into a house. And when I moved out of this apartment complex, I ended up moving into the house next to them. So but this one guy, my neighbor, was next door listening he used to always listen to his police radio. And he's listening to about a hit and run. And all of a sudden my car comes in and he says, it's Randy. Oh. And they took me to the hospital. And I remember I had them call my neighbor Johnny next to me because they didn't know what I was taking. And it really wasn't Quaaludes, it was Mandrix. And Mandrix were like a Quaalude. They used to make them in England, and they sold them in Mexico. And so it wasn't in the PDR, which used to be my Bible in the day. I had all the pills and everything, and all the numbers and all that stuff. But they were taking bets what this pill was, but they couldn't understand me. So I called my roommate John, and he would translate my downer talk, because he knew what I was saying. Stupid stuff like that.
Oh my God.
I was 18 and a half and I moved out of the house.
Right.
And then a good friend of mine, we started partying together in this apartment complex. He joined the Navy, and 6 months later, he went in. Well, 6 months later, he did not want to go in, but he did. He went to school down in naval school in Florida. So I remember hitchhiking from Chicago to Florida to meet him. And he ended up getting stationed in the British West Indies on the island of Antigua. Well, I used to go down there and visit him, and I used to bring drugs in my pants to go sell to the Navy guys because nobody brought drugs down there. But it was all fun and games back then. I turned 19 on the island of Antigua, and I finally got another job. I finally got a job because my girlfriend suggested that I should probably get a job. And I got a job selling timeshare, which I found out later that you really, when you get into the timeshare, you really need to be a good addict and alcoholic for that business. Because I heard about the timeshare people, the timeshare gods in Mexico, where they just worked in the morning and they partied all afternoon and all night. We opened up this one resort. I mean, this resort ran out of sales. I ended up going over to Europe another time with another girl here, and we did went all over Europe and all this other stuff. That's a whole nother story. But when I came back, we went to go to work at a resort over in Bend, Oregon, over in the desert. And this company had 17 resorts. And I was a top sales guy there that summer. And at the end of summer, they said, hey, listen, you were the top sales guy here. If you want to go to Mexico and work one of our resorts down there, go down there for the winter and then come back to Oregon for the summer. High season there, high season here. And I'm like, yeah, baby. Put me down to Mexico. I heard all the stories because in the U.S., when you're selling things, timeshare, there's rights of rescission. You have to sell 10 deals. You keep 7 of them. 3 of the people think about it and they can cancel. Where in Mexico, as I used to call it, it was UFO. You fucking own it. So I tell them, press hard, UFO. What? I said, a joke. I said, I'll tell you later. So I went to Mexico for 6 months, and I stayed there 11 years.
Wow.
I never left because I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. And then that's when, I was charging the hill big time when I got there. I was like 32, I think. But I went there in 1987. And I got down there, and I just loved it because Mexico, are you kidding me? We worked from 8 until 1. You invite the people in for the free breakfast. And then, man, it was just I always surrounded myself, looking back on my drinking days, with people that partied. And that way, if I just over-partied a little more, I was still with a bunch of partiers. But when I got to Mexico, looking back on all these years of drinking, I left the country so I could be where people would just come for a week, a year. And I don't care if they were little drinkers. When they got to Mexico for the week, they were power drinkers. And by the end of the week, they were beat up and they would go home and I would wait for the next group. And I'd be there and they'd go home and I'd wait for the next one. And I did that season after season, year after year. And 11 years. 11 years.
Unbelievable, man. Just hardcore.
But things were very easy to get down there. Coke was cheap. It was plentiful. And you're at the bars drinking, you go down to Sunset, you hit the Carlos and Charlie's, you got the Sunsets, you got the women, you got everybody's partying. In Mexico, they party a lot more than here. And people go there for a week at a time and they just get all nuts. And then they go home. I remember I was just thinking about this one story with this morning when I was thinking about doing this with you. And at the job that they sent me to in Mazatlan my first year, I was there. And I remember a couple come in and you have a little thing and you have a questionnaire. You ask them when they vacation, how long they go and all this stuff. I remember being there and all of a sudden a nice big blood just dripped out of my nose right on the paper.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, well, they turned the other way and I had to get up and stuff toilet paper in my nose. And finally, I got fired from that job. They said, Randy, you're just doing too much stuff. Well, I said, well, wait a minute. You were asking me to get you stuff. What do you mean I'm getting fired? You used to come to my house and do stuff. But I got fired, and I went to go work in another resort because in the timeshare, if you sell good, people know you, and then you just move on. So I ended up a year in Mazatlan, and then my buddy got the job to go down to Zihuatanejo and Ixtapa and open up the Holiday Inn for timeshare. He says, Randy, come on down and help me do this. So I ended up going down to Zihuatanejo and Ixtapa, and I ended up being there for 10 years.
Good Lord.
And then it started, I remember at one point in time saying, you know what? I guess I'm always just going to have to maintain this thing. I didn't really call myself an alcoholic. I knew it. But I just knew that if I had to have some beers in the morning to take the shakes off and everything, and then once I didn't party for a little bit, it'd be okay. But somewhere in this 11 years of charging the hill in Mexico, I mean, it was crazy. I even got into, at one point in time, I told my boss, and one time my boss ended up getting a chimpanzee at the resort. He traded timeshare for this chimpanzee that I got to take care of for 2 years.
Right.
People would wonder how I'd keep my job as party as much as I did. And I was a manager at this place. I had a condo right on site for all these years, but I outsold everybody. I remember some of the people saying, Randy, you might want to slow down a little bit. And I'm thinking, hey, buddy, you know what? I'm selling more than you. You're not having fun. I am.
Right.
But, man, talk about a chick magnet. You got a chimpanzee. It beats a puppy to heck. When you walk into the bar with a chimpanzee, it's all over. You give her a beer, and everybody's there. So she used to love the beer because she liked that sweet taste of that stuff. So we used to go out, but I could only give her a couple. I didn't want to get her all hammered like me because she was over 5 years old. They're big. Her name was Tonga. So everybody thought that I had pictures of her with my boss or something, and that's how I kept my job. But I'll get back to that Tonga story later. But
dude, you're killing me, dude. You were living Zihuatanejo with a monkey.
Oh, a chimpanzee, not a monkey, a chimp.
Sorry, my bad.
Oh, she was incredible. She would get out of that cage and they'd call me and I'd have to go get her and all the resort. We had 120 condos at this resort and she was just a crack up. But
you had a monkey on your back and a chimp at your side.
Yes.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. She was incredible. We'd go to the corner to get a beer. We could walk into the store and say, okay, she'd get one, I'd get one. She'd take that Corona bottle. We'd open it up, and she would just guzzle that thing, and then just wait till those suds would come down. And then she'd just smile and hand it to me. I want another one right now. And I had to make her only have two because I didn't want her peeing on me, and I didn't want her to get crazy. But I'm watching her drink, and I'm like, that's the way that I drink. That's what I do. Even to this day right now, I get a bottle of water, I guzzle it. I drink fast. So Mexico, there was a bottom kind of that I hit. I remember going up to my boss one time, and I'm like, I'm on another run. I said, I just have to get out of here. I have to leave right now. Give me $1,000. I'll be back in a week, but I have to go. We'll go. I got to get out of here. And he did. He gave me money. I had a pair of shorts on, a tank top, flip-flops. I went into town in the Zihuatanejo, and I jumped on a bus, and I was going to go visit my friend in Oaxaca. And I got on this bus with nothing, just I had $1,000 in my underwear, in my gym shorts, a tank top on. And I took this bus to Acapulco, which was about 5 hours. Saw a friend there, caught a flight into Oaxaca, got off, and I went to go see my buddy there. And I'm saying, oh my God, I said, I'm whipped. I'm done. Hernan, he used to live in Zihuatanejo and he'd moved to this Oaxaca city. He had horses and he had a house he had just built, and he had these horse stables, and he was living in one of the horse stables that he converted to a room while his house was being almost done. And he said, Randy, come here, lay in our bed in the house and just lay down. And I'm saying, man, Hernan, thank you so much. And this whole way of coming down, all the way down on the bus, the plane and everything else, that's a whole nother story. But I got here and he says, Randy, in the morning, I'm going to give you a gift, the best thing you ever had. And I'm like, Hernan, oh my God, I don't want anything. I just want to stop. And in the morning he came, and I remember it took me a couple of days there of just like sweats and detoxing, and alcohol and nightmares and everything. And this was actually the first time anybody had mentioned AA to me, but I didn't grasp onto it. But he came in the morning and he says, Randy, I got the best thing in the world, and it's called Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, Randy, I'm leaving right now. I'm going to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting up this mountain on my horse, and I would like you to come. And I'm like, I really don't know what that is, and I don't understand Spanish, but I'm too hurt. But he took me that was my first exposure to AA, way in these mountains. But that was like a bottom I hit. But he took me to a doctor who gave me some saline stuff in my arms and everything and gave me some Antabuse. I went back to Ixtapa. And I quit drinking. I didn't drink for 3 years. I didn't have any AA. I didn't know anything about that. I'd still smoke pot and stuff. But I just didn't drink. But I felt a little weird. But I've been doing all this stuff. I finally started doing coke and this other stuff. That was really, talk about insane. Not drinking, being up for 4 or 5 days on coke, even shooting it and doing needles and all that stuff. And then saying, but look at me. I'm not having a drink. I'm doing good. I'm not having a drink.
Ugh.
It was the insanity that would come in. 3 or 4 days of that. And then saying, but I'm not having a drink. And then, it was just sometimes hallucinating and seeing stuff. But I'm flipping back on that now because I know now, looking back, what it was to be that irritable discontent, being that dry drunk, not having a drink. And I remember I went to Acapulco one weekend. It was 4 hours away. And I said, you know what? I'm going to have a drink. And I thought all these people would be disappointed in me when I got back to Zihuatanejo. Nobody even knew that I had even quit really, or I stopped. I mean, nobody cared about anything. But what happened was I was living in Zihuatanejo. I was drinking and using, and it was miserable, and I was skinny. And I had this little house on the beach that I built. And even though I had a condo at this resort, I had this little house on the beach. This beach was kind of out a little bit farther. Nobody thought that it would ever take off. And now it turns out to be one of the biggest beaches down there. And I bought a lot, the first person, for $5,000. And I eventually turned that thing into this house I have right now. But I remember a few years after I had that, my buddy Dewey there was like, hey, Randy, I've got somebody that wants to buy your house, and they're going to give you $100,000 cash. And I was just getting ready to go up to my sister's wedding in California. My mom had retired, moved out to California. She had quit the whole church thing. She had got a job. She retired from the American Bar Association, doing all the magazines, and she had changed so much. But I didn't know that because, I knew it, but I wasn't around. I would never call. Sometimes I'd call if it was good when I was drunk, but I was one of those people who always thought, hey, I'm not hurting anybody. And I'll get into this a little bit later into my story, but you know what? I wasn't there for birthdays. I wasn't there for Christmas. I wouldn't get Christmas cards. I wasn't there when her mother died and all that stuff. But one of those things, I'm not hurting anybody. Wow. So I was going to go up to my sister's wedding. This house was being sold in a couple of days. I was going to get this $100,000, and I'm going to Thailand. I'm going to go and open up a bar. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just going to go. So 2 days before I left, Dewey comes over and says, Randy, that deal just fell through. Oh, my God. I quit my job. I did all this. I didn't have a penny in my pocket. I think my sister got me a plane ticket, so I go up to L.A. for the weekend. Well, my dad was diagnosed with liver cancer. He was still back in Chicago. They've been divorced forever. They said, stage 4, you got a couple years. So I thought, man, I guess I just better stay here. And my mom had suggested that, Randy, you're going to have to get a job. But maybe I said, well, I'll get a part-time job. And then that way, because I know my house is going to sell, and then I can move on. And she says, your dad's dying. Maybe if you just got a regular job, like a real one, I really hadn't had in forever, that you get health benefits. I go get this job. It's 4 blocks away. It's 4 blocks from my mom's house, where this condo we were sharing. So now I'm all of a sudden back living with my mother, which is a part of this story, because now I'm getting to catch up on lost time, things that I missed. Because remember, I didn't hurt anybody in all these 19 or 20 years I was out charging the hill. So now I'm spending time with my mom, and with a real job, I have to kind of toe it down because I have 8 hours a day. I'm supposed to be at work.
Right.
I walk to this job. It turns out, finally, after about a year, I call my friends in Mexico, and I say, Dewey, this is Randy. You guys come up. That house you were going to get and flip, I'll give it to you for $30,000. Just bring me the money. Bring me the cash. You can have it. They immediately came up. They brought $30,000 cash. Of course, I bought everybody plane tickets to Vegas because you had to go to the stupid Vegas thing, and brought like 8 people and blah, blah, blah. We went over there. That weekend, my mom and my sisters, 3 of them had moved out to L.A., they went looking for condos for me. And when I came back from Vegas, I couldn't even stand up at the craps table because I was so drunk. But I kept rolling and rolling. They brought me a chair. I'd never seen anybody get a chair at a craps tables before. But I kept rolling and winning. I kept winning. So I actually came back with some money. I didn't spend the money I took with me. So now my sisters find a condominium for me, a townhouse. Now I'm away from my mom, and I can see myself being kind of by my own, and I'm starting to party a little bit more because nobody's seeing me at night. And I'm on the weekends going down there. Now, when I come back on a weekend, for the first time in all these years, I'm finally like, I drink a beer. I go to the 7-Eleven and buy a big Foster's, and I drink, or I have a beer at home. I drink something. I get sick. I throw up. I couldn't keep it down. That never happened before. Or sometimes I get into the office, and I was shaking so much I couldn't write the order. So after about 3 weeks of this, my boss, Paul, called me in the office. Randy, come on, buddy. What's going on? What is going on here, man? You got to get a grip. And he says, Randy, I think that you should go to see those A&A guys. I'm like, oh, no. Paul, I can get a grip on this. I can do this. He says, Randy, me and my wife, I think this AA is something that could help you out. And I'm like, Paul, man, I'll just stop. Well, I grounded on for 2 more weeks or a week and a half, or maybe it was only a week, but it seemed like that long. And finally at 8:30 in the morning, I went into the office and I said, Paul, I'm going to call those guys. I'm done. I'm going to call those guys. And he says, Randy, you know our office next door? I said, yeah, I know the restaurant that we used to eat at all the time downstairs that we still go to. I'm like, yeah, I know the fucking restaurant next door that we used to go to. And I'm thinking, what's he talking about this for? I'm trying to give him this big insight that I made this move. And he goes, Randy, right next to there's an office. Oh, yeah, great. I know. I see an office there all the time. It says central office. He goes, that's the AA office. That's central office for Los Angeles. He says, why don't you walk down there? I'm like, oh, okay. So that's what I did. Well, I get up, I walk down there. I walk into the office, and I didn't know what the AA office, I didn't know any of that stuff, but there was, the phone booth there, 4 phones on this thing over here. I didn't really notice it, but there's a big room with books and a couple guys standing there looking at stuff. There's a guy, Frank, behind the desk, and he's chatting, and people all kind of laughing and saying stuff. And I'm like standing there and just like looking around, and I'm standing there, and people are laughing and joking and talking. And finally, it seemed like it was a half an hour, it's probably 5 minutes. And the guy says, well, yeah, can I help you? I said, well, yeah, I can't stop drinking. And I'm turning around like, what the hell? Am I in a twilight zone here? What do you mean? Yeah, I need help. I'm in an AA office. You're asking me if I need help? I can't stop drinking. They just started laughing. And then I didn't realize that's where you bought the books. That's where the phones were at. So here I come all the way from Mexico. If I would have sold that house and took off with that $100,000, I would have died.
Yeah.
Would have died. So then I get these jobs that I can't get. All the way back to these things. These are all God shots. This are all stuff. This wasn't coincidence to go all the way to LA to get a job where I could walk 4 blocks to my mom's house to this office in LA in central office.
It's amazing, dude.
Crazy. So then I would go every day at noon. I'd go there and visit Frank. And that's how it started for me. That's how it started. I got there and I went to the meeting. And the first meeting was in this church over here. It was kind of different for me. I went back and gave me another meeting. And I wanted to go to meetings kind of by the beach because I wanted to see the ocean. And I went to some 7:45 meeting in Marina Del Rey. I drive, and I was Santa Monica. It was a Saturday morning meeting, but I started going to some meetings. And I went in there, and I'm like, wow, you know what? They were having some fun in there. I mean, not everybody. It's like anything. But I'm like, look at that, man. So I start hearing people share, and I'm like, man, Randy, alcoholic. That I had no problem with. I knew it. That wasn't a deal. I was resigned to that fact a long time ago. But I knew now that this was my last shot. And it happened to me May 12th, 2000. It was Mother's Day. And I called my mom. I said, hey, Mom, you know what? I'm going to AA now. And she knew about AA because my younger brother, who had a lot of mental issues, and he was an alcoholic and addict and passed away when he was about 30. My mom used to take him to AA meetings as well. And Mom says, Randy, wow, hallelujah, man. And she says, Randy, you know what? 2 things. Do this like you've done everything else in your life. Meaning, do it like you did your drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Do it like you chased women. Do it like you traveled. I would hitchhike all over the country. I would just go. I traveled everywhere. And I didn't worry about it because I knew wherever I went, I could handle it. So she says, Randy, do this like you travel, do this like you do your stuff. And then she says, and one thing, spirituality is different than religion. Because she got off of that whole religion stuff. And she got away from that. It was so weird going in and hear my mom swear and have drink some wine when I moved to LA. But that's what she said. So I remember I started going to meetings. Right. And the meetings, you know what? You go, and when you leave this meeting, you should have your next meeting planned. So I get up in the morning, I go to a morning meeting. Noon, I see Frank in the office, and I go to a night meeting and go back to work. And I did that for 2 weeks. And then it was the first time, and I saw hope in these rooms. And I remember I was trying to make up these little things. Hope, I said, was having ongoing positive encouragement. I knew there was hope in there. I seen the lights in people's eyes. And I hear people say, hey, you knew? You know what? Don't leave before the miracle. And I'm like, what? The miracle? I just want to quit drinking, man. I don't know what miracle you're talking about, but I just want to take, get this edge off. And, that's all. I don't know what miracle.
Yeah.
But I hear these people, but they're laughing and people are having a good time. And then I hear them say, you got to hang with the winners. Hang with the people that are having some fun.
Right.
I'm seeing that. So I'm starting, I hear you need to go to book studies. You need to go to step studies. So I started going to a step study on Wednesday night. I started going to a book study. And after about 2 weeks, the closest meeting I could find was in West Hollywood. It was a gay meeting in West Hollywood.
Right.
And I remember talking to my mom. Oh, and here's a very important thing for me. Once I got into AA, I started calling my mom every single morning. Never do that before, ever. Because I didn't want to know she was loaded. She knew I was loaded.
Right.
All this stuff. Mom, how you doing? And it was funny. It's like my sponsor almost. And I told her on Mother's Day, I said, Mom, I'm not doing this because it's Mother's Day. It just happens to be Mother's Day. You know, me. Well, a few weeks later, it was 4th of July weekend coming up. And all of a sudden, it was a long weekend. And I thought, wait a minute. So I went to this Friday meeting, and they said, hey, there's a roundup this weekend in Torrance, South Bay Roundup. I'm like, a roundup? We got cowboys in here? What do you guys do? They said, no, it's where it's big. Everybody gets together. It's a holiday weekend, and there's meetings, and there's dances and women. I'm like, oh, wow, there's women, and there's dancing, and the last thing I needed. So I go to the South Bay Roundup, and I check into the hotel and get a room.
Right.
Now, before this happened, I was at a book study, and there was a guy sitting next to me, Michael T., and I remember talking to him, and after the meeting, he says, hey, man, you got yourself a sponsor yet? And I said, well, no, but I hear people talking about that. He goes, hey, I can be your temporary sponsor, whatever you want. I'm saying, yeah, that'd be great. And he goes, good, let's go through the steps, you know. And I'm saying, hey, I'm in. Because luckily for me, I jumped in with both feet. For me, I just knew this was my last chance. And if I gave myself one little out, I could talk myself in and out of anything.
Right.
So we started going to him to this very famous men's meeting on Wednesday nights, and a lot of sobriety in there, a lot of men with 20, 30, 40 years sobriety. And we would work on the steps outside. But this weekend was coming up, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, man. Monday's going to be a holiday. What am I going to do after I go to my morning meeting? So I got in there, and I checked into that thing so I could just be around people. And it was that South Bay Roundup. And I remember there was a countdown in that room. And they went around to see, and they started with the oldest people. I was probably 500 people in there or something. And they got down to 30 days. Then all of a sudden they did the countdown where it got down to 14 days or whatever. And then that was me. And I stood up. I was the only person that stood up for 14 days. And people are screaming and yelling. I'm like, wow. And then this guy hands me a marble. And he says, hey, dude, here, have this. Next time you want to drink a beer, you order that beer, you put that marble in that beer glass, and as soon as it devolves, man, you just chug that thing. And I still have that marble to this day.
Oh, wow.
I still have that marble to this day. But man, so that was my first little experience with that. So I just started with that. And then I remember I went to meetings, and I went to meetings, and I went to meetings. They said 90 and 90 days, you know, and I did like 180. I just didn't want, and the more I went, the more I liked it. I saw hope in these rooms, and I saw the positive stuff, and people were talking about, oh, self, and I said, oh, self, okay, that's so entirely losing focus. That was my little play on words with that one, and I was just hungry for this, and I came around pretty quick for me, because once I quit drinking, I guess I had weaned myself off for about that year with this job and everything, and I was able to quit smoking cigarettes right away, too, because, of course, I started smoking cigarettes when I was 30 in Mexico. Everybody else did.
Right.
But I still got friends that can't get rid of that. But I just got into this. And I remember my sponsor was saying, you know what, Randy, when we get to this 4th step, if I was you, I'd just do it. Other people kind of sometimes they dwell on that. But we got to the 4th step. I just did it. They said, Randy, hang with the winners. So I remember my sponsor saying, Randy, I think you better get a commitment at one of these meetings. You need a commitment. And I'm like, well, it makes you part of this or whatever. Oh. So I go to my one meeting and I get, hey, man, need a commitment. Great. You can make some coffee. Cool. Well, the next meeting I go to, yeah, my sponsor says you get a commitment. Yeah, why don't you set the chairs up? Hey, great, man, I'll do that. I went to the other meeting on Wednesday night. Yeah, why don't you come in and open this one up? Great. I went to my Saturday meeting. I got a commitment. So then I see my sponsor the next week, and I said, hey, man, I got 6 commitments. He goes, oh, well, wait, slow down. Take it. You okay?
Easy does it.
Easy does it, man. Take it easy. But, man, getting those commitments, if somebody's a newcomer, just listen. For me, when I came in, this was the easier, softer way because I didn't have to think. If I just followed the suggestions, I was kind of off the hook because I wasn't getting my own 2 cents in there. You know, I just loved it. So I wanted to have fun. I wanted to do stuff. I wanted to get into this, and I wanted nature, and I wanted to have some exercise, and body, mind, and spirit. And that's what I did. it just kept going through these steps and going to the meetings and hanging out with the right people and starting to have fun and hanging out with winners and sitting up close and getting there early and hanging out late. That was what it was all about for me. It was just finally, I don't even know when, but the obsession was lifted a long time ago. Even back in my sobriety, I don't remember when it was lifted, but other people saw it before I did. And that's what they say in the program. I didn't have the burning bush variety of a spiritual awakening or whatever. And then when I hit my 1-year birthday, I got my 1-year birthday. I gave my mom that chip. And I remember hitting that 1 year, unbelievable. 1 year in a row, right. No drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
1 whole year. I'm telling you what. So right then and there, right before that 1 year came up, I got on and I made some phone calls. I wanted to whitewater raft the Grand Canyon. And I got a last minute cancellation from this one group that had a room for one person. And my 1 year birthday, I whitewater rafted the first half of the Grand Canyon. Went there by myself, got in with this group of people, and whitewater rafted that Grand Canyon. And unbelievable. I wanted to go. I knew it was a spiritual place, very spiritual. Being 6 days inside that canyon, going down that river. Oh man, I was 1 year sober, and I'm like, wow, I can do this. And I said, okay, if I do something cool on my 1 year birthday, if I'm going to think about going out sometime, I can say, look at what you did. Things are going good. So man, going down there, and that was a spiritual thing, going through that canyon, and a very amazing, amazing place. And my second year, I'd be sitting at work, and now I'm starting to sell. My sales they got better, and my boss was loving it. And now he was giving me a little bit more free time. And I'd be sitting there at work, and I'm waiting for some leads, and I'm reading about, oh man, look at this. Machu Picchu, they say, if that's a fault zone in the next 10 years, an earthquake might bring that down. I had a friend in the program. She saw a picture of Machu Picchu at my place, and I'm saying, she had always wanted to go there. And I said, hey, me too. And this was in August. And I say, hey, my boss will give me some time off. You want to go there? I knew that was a spiritual place. Yeah. So I told my boss, boom, me and her went down there. Went down to Peru for 10 days. I was there. I remember we went down that one day there, and I got up there early in the morning before anybody else got out there. And I'm sitting up there in Machu Picchu in this spiritual, crazy place that is just a place everybody's got to go to. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm sitting up here at Machu Picchu. You got to be kidding me. This is great. That next year on my second birthday, I went to Borneo. And to get back to my monkey, my chimpanzee, she was just an amazing creature because they look right through you and they're so human-like and amazing. And nobody should ever have those for pets. But I got into all this stuff, the primates and how great they were. My boss ended up having to sell her. But I wanted to go see these orangutans and go to the orphanage and go to the oldest rainforest in the world. And so I read about how they were chopping down the rainforest and 25,000 orangutans left in the wild, and they're going to be gone in about 10 years. So I went there as my second AA thing, second AA birthday. And I'm down there in Borneo, and I'm at this hotel. And all of a sudden the next morning I'm going down to this river. It's called the Kinabatangan. It's like the Amazon. And we're going to go through this nature thing. But that morning, I see a friend of mine, Katie, from Santa Monica, with some AA people. They were on an AA dive trip. They were in the hotel in Borneo.
Get out of here.
Hey, what? And they're like, Randy, what's up, dude? I was like, oh, man, this is in Borneo. So that morning, we go, and we have a 4-hour ride through this jungle. We have to get in the deepest part of this rainforest. And then we got in this boat and went down this thing called the Kinabatangan River. And I get off at this little lodge right on this river. And I'm sitting there on that lodge. And I'm on this river. And all of a sudden, about a half hour later, I see a boat coming by. Long boat. And there's like 10 people on it. And it was the AA diving group. And they didn't see me. And they drove right by my lodge. I said, where's that boat going? They go, there's another lodge down here about a mile. And I said, where's the path? They said, there's a path right behind the thing here. Just follow it. Well, I went right behind the thing. I waited about 15 minutes and they got in there. They got all set up. I went down there, and about a half hour later, I showed up, and they're all sitting out there talking. I said, hey, I heard there's a meeting here. And they turned and looked, and what the heck are you doing here, man? We had a meeting right there in the middle of the jungle in Borneo.
Oh, my God.
Oh, man, HP all the way, baby.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
Come on. So, man, the 3rd year birthday, I'm sitting at work. I'm reading about, look at Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. They're saying that the glacier is going to melt in 10 years. There's going to be no more snow up there at the top. And if you want to go to Kilimanjaro and climb that 19,343-foot mountain, which is the tallest mountain in the world you can climb without technical gear, if you want to see those snows at Kilimanjaro, you got to go. As I was reading about that, because now I'm daydreaming and things are cool. I get in the research on the computer waiting for my sales stuff. And then I was also reading about the silverback gorillas in Uganda. There's only 630 silverback gorillas left in Uganda. And they're chopping down the rainforest there too, and they're going to be gone. So my third year birthday, I went to Africa. I did the trip, and I did a 6-day climb. And I summited Mount Kilimanjaro.
Get out, man.
I had my higher power hiking flag inside my thing. Oh, my God. Look at this, man. I got 3 years clean and sober. And I pulled out my higher power hiker flag, and I waved that thing in there. And I was just like, here I am at the top of Kilimanjaro, man. I'm looking at the nature, seeing this and that, and I couldn't believe it. And I came down from that mountain, and I remember I took out my camera, and it froze. So I took out a little movie camera, which I still have, and I did a shout out to my sponsor, my grand sponsor, my great grand sponsor at the men's group on Wednesday nights. And then I did the thing, Higher Power Hikers, and I'm like, wow, you know what? This is a miracle. And it's all because I took and I followed some suggestions, and I did those 12 steps. And I just took some suggestions and got a sponsor and hung out with the right people and did the right step and finally got that spiritual connection and got that thing that I was looking for the whole time that was always there. It was inside of me. I just didn't know it. I left that mountain and we climbed down. The next day I flew to Uganda. I rented a 4-wheel drive vehicle. I got this driver and we drove over to this one jungle 12 hours away, and I did the mountain gorilla tracking. And, so it doesn't mean you're always going to find them. But there's 6 of us. And they only take 6 at a time. And if you do find these mountain gorillas, you get 1 hour to be with them. They don't want you to get them sick. And we're going that morning. He says, we can only go to where they were yesterday, way up on the top of that mountain. It'll take us about 3 hours to get there, and we'll see if they're there. Well, as we're getting a little closer, only an hour into it, and he says, hey, look at this. He goes, sometimes they come back this way early in the morning. And finally he says, wait a minute, man. The guys are up there, and I think they're up here. And all of a sudden I hear the guy start making these noises, and he's talking to the gorillas. We're here. Will you let us in? And they do the same thing back. And so, man, we get up there, and then there I am. I got my movie camera. You can't take a flash camera with them, but I got my little movie camera, and I'm looking at the screen. And, man, he pulls apart these bushes, and 10 feet in front of me is a big silverback just chewing on this piece of bamboo. And he's looking at me right in his eyes, and I'm almost smiling. And I'm looking at him. And I'm like, oh, my God, look at this guy. I had 2 of these on my back. One was drugs and alcohol. The other was the wreckage of my past. So I'm looking at that gorilla saying, oh, my God. I remember my sponsor saying, Randy, the sobriety is just like, I don't want to say fuck, but, making love to a gorilla. He goes, it ain't over till the gorilla says it's over. And I'm laughing to myself. I remember him telling me that. It ain't over till the gorilla says it's over. I'm looking at that gorilla. And I saw that drugs and alcohol and stuff, and now he's looking at me, and all I see is God in those eyes, just looking at me. I'm like, oh, my. Man, that was this incredible thing. And then next year, I went to the Kingdom of Bhutan. I did this trip to the Himalayas, sober, celebrating my 4th birthday. And I'm going to the base of this 25,000-foot mountain, their most spiritual mountain called Mount Jomohari. And my dad had passed away from his cancer, and I had his ashes, and I was taking him at some of these places and putting his ashes out. And I get to this base of the spiritual mountain. After 10 days of trekking, we're going along this old Tibetan trading route because we're right next to Nepal, and Tibet's just over the Himalayas on this side. And I'm in this really special, this Bhutan's an unbelievable place. And we're going down this river because that's the easiest part to kind of walk. And there was bridges. There were hundreds of years old that the Tibetans had built. And I remember I was crossing this one bridge, and I turned around to take a picture of it, and I'm looking at that bridge. Then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I haven't burned a bridge in 4 years. And I'm like, that's all I did, Rick. And you said, hey, time to get out of here, baby. Let's do a geographic. So there I was celebrating more sobriety. And then one more year, the next year I went down to Chile and did this Patagonia trip and some other stuff. And I came back, and then I don't want to get into all these other stories like that, but that's when I moved down here. I ended up coming down here to Nicaragua. So now, here I am. I've got this. As long as I just maintain that spiritual connection, every day I get up and say, man, thank you, man. Whatever your will is for me today, that's it. It's in your hands. Let me do. So I'm sitting down here right now. I don't have another run left in me. I have dreams all the time, even to this day. I'm using, I'm drinking, I'm doing coke, I'm doing lines from here to San Jose that aren't big enough. And what? So if you're new out there and you're still having dreams, it doesn't matter. It's a freebie for you. But I still have all this drinking and using, and they're all the same. But you know what? I'm here. And I remember when I first came into this program, I remember at that men's meeting, George O., he would say, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got.
Yep.
Oh, man. And you only got to change one thing, everything. You know?
Yeah.
If nothing changes, nothing changes. Man, so by the grace of God and by this program and suggestions and hanging out and people like you, meeting you and Manuel Antonio at the convention, and now we got deep friendships from all over the world. Everything that I was looking for, it was always inside of me all the time. I just never knew it. That hole was filled with other stuff. Now I've got the sunlight of the Spirit on there.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for, I guess, let me share this today. It's sitting here and rehashing some old stuff. I hope I wasn't all over the board or anything, but man, this is the real deal right here.
This is the real deal, Randy. And that is an amazing, amazing story, man. Wow. Wow. Just so much, so much. Thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. And really, man, you should have died a bunch of times.
Oh, oh yeah.
As we're going through your story, I can't believe that all the traveling, every place that you've been to, all the using, all the partying, all the drug dealing, put you in so many risky situations, and you survived all that by the grace of God so you could share your experience, strength, and hope with others. And that is what it's all about, brother. I love it, man. Thank you. So now, as we move into the close of our show, Randy, we're going to move into the section I call For the Newcomer. I'm going to ask you 5 questions about your early recovery, and you're going to respond with inspiring and insightful answers you can share with our newcomers. Are you ready?
I'm ready, my man.
Awesome. All right. So what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
Really nothing. When I jumped in with both feet.
You were done.
I was done, man. I was scared that I did not have one more chance. It was the last house on the block, and I've got 15 years and some change now. I was just afraid that if I went out, it's not that I was afraid about coming back. I was just afraid I'd die. That's my main thing. I was afraid I wouldn't have another run left in me.
Perfect. I love it, man. Number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery, when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
Well, in the meetings, I kind of got onto that kind of quick about, I saw there was hope in there. I saw what was happening. And if it was happening with some other people, I knew that it was there. I think my moment was where I really started doing that 4th step. And I really felt good to myself that I was finally giving this a really good shot and going inside myself and really looking back on things. That was probably like my first spiritual awakening, because it just felt good that I was finally not running away from things like I used to do. I was finally looking at it.
Awesome. I love it. And number 3, do you have a favorite book that you could recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery?
Well, A New Pair of Glasses by Chuck C. That's always a good one.
That's a big favorite.
Yeah. But the other thing is, too, get your daily reflections. That's a great way to read that daily reflections every day. And it keeps you right on track. Every day, just pick up that daily reflections. It's easy to read, and you go through the whole year and go through all the steps and everything in there.
Love it. Beautiful suggestions. All right. Number 4, what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Do your 4th step for sure. Don't be thinking about it. Oh man, people go out. Get in there and do your 4th step. But hang out with winners. Get commitments at your meetings, but hang out with the people that are doing it. Hang out with the people that are having fun. Look for the light in their eye.
Absolutely. Randy, great suggestions, brother. And before we say goodbye, I have one more question. What is your favorite meeting that you attend, and where is that group located?
We're right here in San Juan del Sur. I mean, we got 3 meetings here. It's right on the beach.
And what's the name of that group?
San Juan del Sur, SJDS, Sober Journey Down South.
Awesome. I love it.
Sober Journey Down South.
Love it, man. Love it. All right. We have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the Share Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.thesharepodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.